Good morning, Sunnyside. It's good to see you. This is the last, as Sean mentioned, in a series on Timothy, 2 Timothy chapter 4. If you want to get your Bibles out, we're going to take a look at that in just a little bit. And Corey will be back next week. He'll be wrapping up this week his study and family break. And so we're excited about having him back. I know we are here in the office. I'm sure you are as well. But I get one more shot at this, wrapping this series up today. Kind of wraps up our summer theme of fun that we've been doing with our luau, as was mentioned earlier. So I want to invite everybody again to that, to come back after second service. We're going to have a potluck meal over here in the venue. It's going to be a lot of fun just to get to know each other a little bit better. So we want to welcome all of our guests, by the way, who are here this morning, that you're welcome to come and be a part of that too if this is your first time here at Sunnyside. I've had the privilege of traveling to Israel a couple of times, and when I was there the last time, we went and saw Masada. How many of you have seen Masada or seen it on television? Or it's a fantastic and a very interesting place. It's a giant rock, which is what Masada means, on top of this giant rock out close to the Dead Sea, so it's kind of in a deserty area. There's a lot of history behind it, but King Herod, during the time of Christ, about that time period, he rebuilt the whole thing, and it became a place for him to kind of hide away if he needed to escape, if there was ever a revolt or anything. So it's kind of a fortress on top of this rock. It's amazing that it was done thousands of years ago. Anyway, what happens there now is that they remember an event that took place all after 70 AD or so, about in the 90s somewhere. Masada was a place where the rebels who were rebelling against Rome, the Jewish rebels, hid out. They'd already leveled Jerusalem, and these were the last. There was less than 1,000. There was 900 and some people on top of this rock. Okay, and they fought to the death. Matter of fact, Rome had sieged it. It was a long siege. There was nobody going in and out. They had to build, with dirt, they built a ramp up to this on the back side of that. You can't see it from here. Well, I guess you can see it kind of over there on the edge. And that's how they got into the fortress. Those folks in there, the legend says that they killed themselves. Others say that they would never have killed themselves, that they killed each other, because they weren't going to be slaves to Rome anymore. And they were done. But the bottom line is, Rome took it. Rome overcame it. What they do at Masada every year now is the IDF, or the Israeli Defense Forces, those who join the military, when they join the military, they go on top of Masada to say their oath and pledge to serve Israel. And the last thing that they say in their military oath is, Masada shall not fall again. And it's kind of a symbolic act to saying we will never let Israel fall again. You know, oaths and promises are a part of just about any military in the world. Matter of fact, in the United States, it starts off like this. Many of you in this room have said this. You put your name in there, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to the regulations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, so help me God. How many of you remember saying that? Yeah, a lot of you. Hoorah, okay. Doctors say what's called a Hippocratic oath, to do no harm. The oath of office is taken by politicians over and over again. Becoming a citizen requires what's called a naturalization oath. I know some of our folks have taken that one. Financial people take the fiduciary oath. Scouts take an oath. You take an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth if you have to go on the witness stand in a trial or something in court. We take an oath when we say our marriage vows. Oaths are a part of life, right? We say them all the time. Now, were you ever a kid and you broke a promise, but you had a reason for it? What? Had my fingers crossed behind my back. Yeah, you ever do that? Yeah. Okay, well, adults do that too, you know. Okay, sometimes we break our promises. And really, I want you just to think for a second. Think of all the pain, all the hurt in the world because somebody broke a promise. A nation broke a promise. An individual broke a promise. An organization broke a promise. We are less trusting these days as Americans than we ever have been before. That's what all the research shows. that Americans have become less trusting than we ever have before. Government heads the list of the least organizations trusted, okay? Or the least trusted organizations. Next is television news. Now big business is not being trusted anymore. Trust in schools, churches, ouch, and the police is declining. And the reasons that is happening, the researchers are telling us it's things like unethical behavior within those organizations. A big one is when people in those organizations do not take responsibility for their mistakes. Lack of transparency, they feel like they're hiding something, and the list goes on. But we have to consider the fact that trust is lost most when someone doesn't keep their promises. Let me say that again. Trust is lost most when someone doesn't keep their promises. Whether or not it's intentional doesn't matter, actually. Research shows. And sometimes we intentionally say, I'm not going to do that, can't fulfill my vow. And sometimes we forget. I'm forgetful. I forget things. I've not done things that I should have done or said I would do because, it just got away from me, time, distractions. So sometimes all of us need to be reminded of our oaths, of our promises. Sometimes gently, right? Sometimes firmly. Like when you're going out the door and your mom says, don't forget. Or when you're going out the door and your dad says, if you forget, I am going to. We need both sometimes, right? Solomon wrote these words in the book of Ecclesiastes, when you vow a vow to God, do not delay in keeping it. For he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you vow. It's better that you should not vow than you should vow and not pay. Moses said this about our God. This is the God that we worship. God is not a man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. He has said, and will he not do it? Or he has spoken, and will he not fulfill it? He's saying God will keep his promises. Always has, always will. Jesus declared these simple words, let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. Simply put, when you make a vow, take an oath, say a promise, God notices, right? God cares about that. And the most important promise that we ever make is to follow Jesus. Agreed? The most important promise that we ever make, because it affects our eternity, is to follow Jesus. Now, with that said, I am going to ask, before the message is over this morning, I'm going to ask all of you to take an oath this morning. Okay? Most of you have already taken it. So you're going to be re-upping, basically. Some of you, this may be a first this morning, this oath. And some are not going to join in, and I get that. You may not be ready fully to commit. Remember, God says, if you're not ready fully to commit, then don't commit. Because I'd rather you admit that you're not ready than to rashly agree to something that you're not ready to fulfill. So I want to kind of go in the line of thinking of letting your yes be yes and your no be no, as Jesus said. And as I mentioned, we're finishing up the series, the two sermon series, one to 1 Timothy, one to 2 Timothy this morning. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, I want you to get started. Look at verse 5 with me this morning. And Paul is giving his ministry student Timothy, that's what this letter is all about. He's writing to his young protege a challenge. And he calls him out. And he says this in verse 5. As for you, he's talking to Timothy, Paul talking to Timothy, as to you, always be sober-minded. Endure hardship. Do the work of an evangelist. Fulfill your ministry. Now remember, this is Paul's last written letter that we have a record of. Okay? He may have written other letters, but this is the last one that we have him writing and having included into the New Testament. His last words on paper. And this is the last chapter of that last letter. Last words are lasting words. If you had one letter left to write, what would you write to those who come behind you? That's Paul's mindset here. Of all the things going through his mind, this is what's most important. Okay, so what we're going to do, we have done this every week throughout this whole series, so this will be the last time we do that. We practice what we call D1 here at Sunnyside, which is a daily one book, one chapter, one verse, one thought practice of studying our Bible. It's a daily Bible study. And so we have on your tables, on those glass placards, you can look it up in your Bible, on your phone, whatever you want to do, but I want you to read the entire 4th chapter right now. I'm going to give you time to do that, 4 minutes. Read the entire 4th chapter. Whatever sticks out to you, you're going to remember and talk to about folks with your table there, okay? But here's what I want you to think as we're walking through this. Look at those things from the point of Paul saying, okay, this is the last few words I'm going to be able to record to my son in the faith, Timothy. Okay? What important things do you think stick out to you? So, if you're new to us today, we've been doing this every week, and so we want to encourage you, if you'd like, to visit with somebody else, make sure nobody's alone, and gets a chance to read this. But we're going to give you 4 minutes to read this, and then I'll come back in 4 minutes and we'll finish up the message. Okay? So on your marks, get set. 2 Timothy chapter 4. Okay, again, I love to hear that buzz. I love to hear you guys talking. I've really enjoyed this. I don't know about you, but I've enjoyed this, taking this time out every week to read a chapter that we're working on. It just, we want to be a Bible-believing and a Bible-teaching church, and we really want you guys to be into the Bible and to check everything out yourself. You need to be familiar with the Bible, which is one of the things that we've learned in this series about being able to correctly handle the truth and know the truth. And so that's been a theme here. So I hope you've been enjoying this and getting a chance to see other people's perspective and reading it at a different level. What do you think, as you read through that, what do you think Timothy said at kind of Paul's request, Paul's charge? Not today, Paul. I'm not ready. Or maybe like kind of like a junior high his dad asked him to mow the lawn. Well, okay, if you're really going to make me. You think Timothy said that? Do you think he said, well, let me check my calendar. My wife, she's the whole social calendar thing. I got to check with her first, I don't know if I can get into this Jesus thing quite yet. Some historical accounts say that Timothy stayed in Ephesus for many, many years, and he actually died a martyr's death. We don't know, this doesn't say this in the Bible anywhere, but some history tells us that there was a big festival going on in Ephesus, worshiping one of the goddesses of sexuality, and Timothy had had enough. And there was like a parade, a procession going down, and they were celebrating immorality and all this stuff, and Timothy steps out in front of the parade and says, this is enough. You Ephesians are crazy. Stop it. This is dishonoring God. And he just kind of preached this sermon and disrupted the whole pagan festival. And so some people beat him with clubs, which he died from his wounds a couple of days later. That was about in AD 97, they think, right when the Apostle John was exiled to the island of Patmos and wrote his famous book, Revelation. But I think it's safe to say that when Timothy read this letter from Paul for the first time, I can imagine the courier bringing it and saying, Timothy, I got this letter. It's probably been weeks since he's written it. By the time they didn't have, mail or email or anything like that. It probably took a long time to get there. And he opened up that scroll very carefully and read every single word. And I think when he got to this part, by the time he gets to the end of the letter, they didn't have chapters and verses. It was just one big narrative. And as he's reading this, I think he's saying out loud, yes, Paul, I will, I'll do it. I promise. I'm going to do it, Paul. And no doubt with great enthusiasm. And again, history tells us that he did exactly that, even if it cost him his life. So my challenge this morning to you is to do the same thing that Timothy did. To take that oath and say, I will live for Jesus every single day. Not just some of the time, not just on Sunday, not just when I go to family, get-togethers. I'm going to be a follower of Jesus every single day, 24/7. And so as we conclude this series on discipleship, the big idea is simply this, that my most important decision is to daily follow Jesus. Emphasis on what? Daily. This is a decision that we make every day when we wake up. I'm going to follow Christ today because the Lord in heaven knows that there are distractions galore. There are things that are pulling at you. There are days you don't feel like following Jesus. There are days that you don't follow Jesus very close. And at the end of the day, or maybe at the end of a season, a couple of days, a couple of weeks go by, a month goes by, and you go, man, I have not been following Jesus. We're going to change that today. Now, before we dig into verse 5, I'm going to come back to verse 5, so keep looking at that. There are 4 decisions that daily we need to make that I want to share with you from that verse. But I want to put that verse kind of in the context of how Paul wrote it. In the first 5 verses, Paul is stating in verse 1 how serious and important what he is saying it really is. As I charge you by the Lord God Almighty. This is important stuff. He says, first, I want you to fulfill your task of being called to be a preacher, Timothy. That's who God called you. Now I want you to go do it. Keep doing it. Apparently, Timothy was not quite the type A personality that Paul was, the go-get-em, the get-her done. He was a little bit more timid. We can ascertain from this and other passages. And Paul said, you gotta be up front, man. You got to be the man. And every preacher, I think, should dissect this verse before ever getting into a pulpit and say, yes, I will. The reason is because there will be people, he says, who aren't going to want to hear what you have to say. Did you get that out of there as you read through that? They're not going to want to hear the truth. They'd rather listen to myths and fanciful stories. Make something up, but don't tell me the truth, Timothy. I don't want to hear that. And what that kind of teaching does, if you give in to that, deflects from the truth and even perverts the truth and makes it maybe more palatable, but it doesn't do anybody any good, and in the end, it'll destroy a church. Now, I didn't see this movie, but I've heard the quote hundreds of times. It's a movie, Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise starring, called A Few Good Men. It's about a Marine Corps court martial. And Tom Cruise plays the lawyer. Nicholson's on the stand getting interviewed by or questioned by Tom Cruise. And Tom Cruise asks a question of Nicholson, who's on the stand. And here, in part, is their exchange and that famous quote. Watch this.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
How many of you have heard that quote? Okay. Paul is telling Timothy, there's going to be some people that can't handle the truth. That doesn't stop you from preaching it. Okay? So, we have to be able to understand that that's what Paul's talking about. In the next part of this verse, in verse 9 and through the next section, verses 6 through 8, let's address that real quick. Paul acknowledges that it's not going to be too long before he's gone. We've talked about that a little bit. Paul knows this is it. I'm not getting out of prison. Whether the Holy Spirit's telling him that, he senses that, whatever it is, he knows he's not getting out. This is it for him. Then in verse 9 and through the end of the chapter, Paul's asking Timothy, because can I see you just one more time? Can you come to Rome and see me? Bring Mark, who he had a disagreement with earlier in his ministry. Now they apparently made up, and he appreciates Mark, wants Mark to come. He wants his coat. Bring my coat. There's no Walmart in Rome, apparently, that he can just go down and get another one. So he needs to go get his coat. My study materials, come as quickly as you can. He mentions it twice in there about Timothy coming to see him. And in this context, Paul is telling Timothy, in 2 Timothy chapter 4, the decisions that he needs to make. And I want to make a case that those are decisions that we need to make as well as followers of Jesus Christ, as his disciples. Before you say, yes, I will make these decisions, or I'm in, or no, forget it. Let's unpack it a little bit with some application so you know what you're getting into. And remember, my most important decision is to daily follow Jesus. Say that with me. My most important decision is to daily follow Jesus. Very simple, right? Okay, decision number 1 in that verse, chapter 4, verse 5. Be on your game. That's what he's telling Timothy. Be on your game. Be sober-minded is the way most of your versions read. It's the opposite, really, of being drunk. Being drunk, you're not clear thinking. You don't know what you're doing. But when he says sober-minded, the word means to be ready for just about anything. The opposite also is not only to be drunk, but to think irrationally. To let life get you so worked up you can't think straight. Now, I compare this to being a world-class athlete. We're the Olympic city, right? When we have world-class athletes here, or you watch the Olympics, you know that those young men and women go through all kind of preparation in order to be on their game, both mental and physical. They are told time and time again, when the gun sounds or when they say go or whatever it is, when it starts, you got to be on your game. You got to be in the right headspace. You ever hear that before? That's exactly what Paul is telling Timothy. You got to be on. Okay? And to be on your game, there are some things that you need to abstain from sometimes, right? So if I get over there and get involved in that, that's going to take me out of whack. What are the things in your life that take you off target from your walk with Jesus that you need to cut out of your life to be on your game? What kinds of things do you need to practice more to be on your game like an athlete? To where it becomes muscle memory that we talked a little bit about last week, unconscious obedience, it's just there. To help you kind of think about this, Peter says it this way. He uses the same word. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. And that word, some of your versions may use the word alert. Be alert. Be sober-minded. Be thinking straight. Be able to know what's going on around you. I taught my kids when they started getting older and going out on their own to cities and traveling, and I just drilled this into keep your head on a swivel. Keep your head on a swivel. Keep your head on a swivel. Dad says keep your head on a swivel. Okay? Pay attention to your surroundings. Vigilance. Okay? In our Christian life, when he says to us, be sober, are you willing to be sober? Are you willing to think straight about your discipleship, to think clearly, to remove the distractions and to practice and to work on those things that help you with that? Number two, decision number two is endure difficulties honorably. Endure difficulties honorably. If you've read any book or watched any videos on success and successful people, what does it take to be successful? One of the most common denominators is people who are successful handle adversity correctly. You ever seen that? Heard that? Successful people know how to handle correctly. That is really true of Christians. Because we have the faith in a God who's going to get us through any difficulty. We of all people should be able to endure difficulties honorably. Remember, these are some of the last things that Paul's telling Timothy. I like what Martin Luther King Jr. said. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And we've heard similar quotes like that over and over again. The Bible teaches this is especially true of us who are following Jesus. We know how to handle adversity. That doesn't make the pain any less. Don't get me wrong. I understand pain. Okay? I've been in ministry for 40 years. I've seen lots of pain. I've seen people handle it honorably, and I've seen people handle it not so honorably. I've seen people lose their faith over pain. I've seen people's faith grow through pain. This is a verse that I kind of struggle with because it doesn't sound very nice. It's not a very compassionate verse that maybe your counselor would use with you. But in Proverbs, Solomon writes, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. That just but it's true. It's true. And so we need to figure out how we handle adversity. If we handle it properly, and it doesn't change the reality of the pain, doesn't change the reality that maybe sometimes our life is messed up, but we have a God who loves us and cares us so much, he will get us through anything. Amen? Number three, the third decision I want you to make this morning is to use your spiritual gift. Use your spiritual gift. For Timothy, it was evangelism. He said, do the work of an evangelist. You fill the blank in whatever your spiritual gift is. And some of you right now are saying, I don't even know what my gift is. That's okay. Find out. The Bible says that all of us have been given a gift, a manifestation of God's Spirit living in our life. It may be the gift of mercy, it may be the gift of hospitality, it may be teaching. There's numerous gifts listed in the Scripture. And all of us need to understand how God has gifted us. And you can say, well, I'm nobody special. I don't want to stick out in a crowd, and I just want to, live my life. That's fine. As a matter of fact, that's what spiritual gifts are all about. It's not you. It's about the Spirit. It's about you being willing to let the Spirit work through you. And use it. That's what he's telling Paul, or that's what he's telling Timothy. Use it. Do it. This is what God's put in your life. Do it. And Timothy, being that timid person, well, I'm not really an evangelist. I don't like to get in front of people. That's okay. The Holy Spirit's going to do it for you. That's why it's called a, what? Gift. Okay? Paul wrote these to the church at Corinth. He said, to each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. So when you don't use your gift, the rest of us miss out on what the Spirit wants to do for me because you won't use your gift. Does that make sense? So Paul is urging Timothy, use your gift. I urge you, use your gift. And there are ways, by the way, to find out your gift. There are online tests and things you can do. You can talk to a pastor, an older Christian, somebody that's been there, done that, and you can work through that. Talk to one of our elders. Say, I don't know what my gifting is. There's trial and error. There's experiment. God will tell you, if you earnestly seek him, he says he will show up and teach you, okay? Number 4, the last one is never quit. Never quit. In verse 5, he says it this way, fulfill your ministry. So he says, use your spiritual gift in ministry, which is evangelism for Timothy. What it is for you, I don't know, but fulfill it. Never quit. The word fulfill here in the Greek means to accomplish or carry something out to the very end. That's exactly what Paul was doing. He says, I'm doing this. The fight's over. I can see the finish line. It's about time for me, and I'm not going to quit till I get there, and I want you to do the same. Showing up when you don't feel like it. You know, much of life is just showing up. Have you noticed that yet? The older I get, the more I realize it's just about showing up and being there. Even when you don't feel like it, even when it's raining, doing the next right thing, and then doing the next right thing, and then doing the next right thing after that. And God will take care of us and walk us through it if we just show up and say, I'm not going to quit. I refuse to give up. You know, when life is hard and things are caving in and our shoulders are heavy, we claim the verse that Jesus said, those of you who are weary and heavy laden, come to me and I will give you rest. And we rely on that and we say, Lord, I don't know how, but I'm going to take one more step. One more step. There are, most of you know that I work part-time here at the church. I work part-time for Camp Como up in Como, Colorado. I love the outdoors. I've always hiked and camped and fished and hunted and so forth. And a lot of you also know that I suffer from migraine headaches often. And there have been times when I've been in the backcountry where there's no ER, the medicine's not working, and I could either just lay there, I guess, and see what happens, or I can get up, get my pack on. And there have been many, many times, many, many miles where I've walked like this because I can't shake my head. It hurts so bad. I'd stop to throw up and vomit, but I got to go like this. I got to go like this. And that's when I start asking myself, you dummy, why are you even here? Why am I here? Why am I doing this to myself? Much of life is like that. It's just I got to get out. I just got to keep moving forward. I got to take one step after another. Don't give up. It will get better. Again, Paul wrote these words to the church at Galatia. He said, and let us not grow weary of doing good. For in due season, in other words, when it's ready, we will reap. If, here's the condition, this is a conditional promise. If we do not what? If we do not give up. My most important decision is to daily follow Jesus with these decisions and others like it. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how young you are. Every day is a day that we decide to follow Jesus because there's a lot of other people clamoring for your attention. There's a lot of other things that want your money. There's a lot of other organizations that would love to have your time. And you have to daily decide, is this the best use of all of those things as I am a follower of Jesus? And there's a lot of times we don't. Why? Why don't we make that simple daily decision? One, you can be distracted and not be on your game. That's why Paul says be sober-minded, be on your game. Because how many things in life distract us from our life with Christ? That's what Satan's whole goal is, by the way, to distract you. That's what the devil prowling around like a roaring lion. By the way, a lion very seldom roars until he's about ready to attack or eat something. And he's prowling around looking for you to have you for lunch. Be sober-minded. Be on your game. Don't let things distract you. Maybe it's because you're distracted by difficult times. Oh, more me. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I'm going to go eat worms. Now, I'm not minimizing real pain and real difficult times. Believe me, I get it. But I want that pain to be turning my faith towards Jesus and towards Him helping me instead of just how bad I got it. You may be distracted because opportunities of the world are in front of you as opposed to opportunities that God is giving you by using your spiritual gift. See, I could use my spiritual gift and get laughed at, get made fun of, maybe even get yelled at. Some people won't like it. Or I could do this thing over here that the world says, and I could make money, I could be famous, I could, have fun. Gift or fun, Don't be distracted by that. Your primary purpose is to use your spiritual gift. I'm not saying that can't be fun too. Can be. And then you may be distracted by the temptation to quit. And I've known people in my life, unfortunately, that have done that and said, I can't do it anymore. I'm done. Don't let that be you. Decide every day that no matter what, I will not quit. Sometimes our own advice is the best advice, so we're going to conclude this whole series with your advice. You're going to be able to write a letter now to one of your Timothys. If you look on the center of your table, there's some blank pieces of paper and should be plenty of pens. And we're going to have you write a letter to a Timothy. I would like it for it to be a real Timothy in your life. Maybe a younger person that you have helped mentor or that looks up to you, that maybe lives clear across the country or in a different country. Somebody that you have an influence over. I'm going to give you a few minutes here during the worship time. You're going to be able to do this as well, to write that letter. And you say, well, I don't really have a Timothy in my life. So number one, I'm asking you, find a Timothy at some point. Remember, we should all have a Paul in our life, someone that we look up to, that is our mentor, that we can ask questions and walk through us with life. And then we need to have a Timothy that we can feed into what Paul is teaching us. I need to teach to my Timothy. And then I just threw this in there last week, that we also need to have a Barnabas in our life, someone that's equal, a peer, that's not super impressed with us, that can shoot straight with us. So we have a Paul, a Timothy, and a Barnabas in our life. Well, you're going to write to that Timothy today. And so I want you to imagine a Timothy if you don't have one. Imagine if I had a Timothy, these are the words that I would write to them. These are the last few words that you're going to write, that I'm going to write to my Timothy. And even this, maybe think of a grandson or daughter or a great-grandson or a great-granddaughter that you might want to write to as well, and say, these are a few of the words that I want you to have as a follower of Jesus, that I want you to remember. Okay, can you do that? So you can get started now. We're going to continue on with the service here. There'll be some more time for you to do that during our worship time. But I want you to do that. What kinds of things would you tell a Timothy concerning their discipleship or their walk with Jesus? My most important decision is to daily follow Jesus. And the first question that we have to ask is that what I'm doing? No fingers crossed, nothing behind the back. Like a soldier on top of a rock of Masada, saying, Masada shall not fall again. I am in. That is my oath to you, Father. I am a disciple and a follower of Jesus. So we're going to give you opportunity to write that letter as we continue on with the service. Now, if during the music time, if you want to pray with somebody or make a decision, a declaration by taking a surrender towel, as we call those, in preparation for baptism, then please do that as well. But right now, I'm just going to ask that you come with me to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you. Well, we thank you so much for Jesus. Help us to see how important it is, our Christianity, our discipleship, our call to follow you. It changes everything, Father. It changes our relationships with other people, how we go to work and the things that we do on a social level. We want to follow you all the time, 100%. So help us to be those 100%ers, those people that are following you no matter what. We ask your blessing upon this rest of this service, that you would speak to our hearts. If there's anyone here, Father, who needs to accept Jesus and follow him for the very first time, I pray that you'd put that on their heart as well, and they would make that decision and say, I will. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.